Hey folks, welcome back. A couple of days have passed and we're finally on to the 23 Halls of Atonement. So without any further delay, let's get into the video. So, onto the Halls of Atonement we go. Same as last time, much like the 21, we are the Venthia of the group. The only difference between this run and our previous run is a different puck healer. We previously had a druid, we now have a shaman. So we're going to take a few of the lessons that we learned previously and we're going to try and improve. The two trinkets I'm using are Changeling and Ruby. I was playing around with double passives in a few lower keys, and the fruits of those will be shown in the 22 Gambit that's going to be scheduled for a few days from now. So I'll either just be getting back when it's released or just after I get back. So this time, the change, rather than using Nadia, is Theatar, taking lessons previously in terms of having an additional form of defensives from the additional mastery of Theatars. We survived a little bit longer there. Unfortunately, could have probably got away with again using Immortal Coil, but I was out of defensives. I didn't have Unending Resolve, didn't have Dark Pact, and the Health Stone and Health Pot were both used up. With a Shaman, again, something that I need to remember when we play Shaman is I need to be more in the taint of things purely because of their healing profile. So it wasn't awesome, but we got the work done. Now, again, kind of going through things. Kicks need to be talked. We do have any additional kick with our healer this time around, so that is nice. And we have the additional Cursed Dispel, essentially. So we're waiting for the Houndmaster to jump in, but the DPS is basically just going through as per usual. We're going to try and use Infernal pretty much on cooldown, so you're actually going to see me pop it immediately here, whereas previously I held it, and you can already start seeing kind of like the difference in how mentally I'm going to be going into this key. Kind of sat on shards for a while there, in hindsight, looking back at this, because I'm reviewing this basically straight away with you guys. So this style is going to be a little bit different to my previous ones, because it's, I'm recording this at 20 past 10 at night. So hopefully it's not too bad for you guys. So we managed to get a full Infernal window there, which was good, and something that I usually worry about. This is probably where we start seeing things where I get more benefit out of using Infernal on cooldown, because we're at a 23 fortified. Mobs have a lot of health. Like this Darkblade, for instance, has just shy of 1 million health. 997k. So it's going to last a while. Now, going back to what we were discussing in the previous videos about the curses, obviously being impending catastrophe, curses are kind of smart applied anyway for us. So it's not something I'm as stringent upon here. However, as you can see, I'm using Havoc where I can and trying to keep it on cooldown. So we're taking that lesson forward, and the shard generation is helping. We don't have Infernal for this large pack, and yet we're still holding about 50k DPS. Now, this is one of the few occasions where I do hold it, because the majority of the mobs now are about 40% health, so I'm not going to get a full window off for my Infernal, and it is better held for the next pull. Got a bit dicey there. We need to try and stop bringing in like lots of small little ads that are just going to bowl over, because we did actually lose someone there. So, not ideal. Now, unlike the previous key, previous halls I refer to, when I say previous key, I'm referring to the 21 halls, I dither and forget about the Stoneborn. Because although I'm playing Venthia, it didn't cross my mind to Stormborn. So you can see here the use of the gateway. So I've taken the little Stormborn already. The pack's been pulled, so I gateway to get there quickly. So I kind of make up for my mistake a little bit, but I'm still late to the party. I Unending Resolve and Dark Pact this the first Thrash, because the healer appeared to be struggling. So by removing the need to heal me at this stage, we can make the fight a little bit easier, at least as things are rolling. I can't remember if it bites me in the ass, so let's find out together. Now, here is a point of note. That particular corner I stood on is line of sight for the thrash, so you can reduce taking a few ticks and kind of mitigate a lot of the damage. Now, it's really good on higher keys to have a line of sight point. There is one for the first shard of Halkias, but I never get there because I am too slow. I think I need to push through the pack and actually position myself close to the line of sight point in future pulls. And it's something that if I do another 23 or 24 or whatever, I will actually test that out. And in answer to my previous question, no, I didn't get caught out, and we do have our Infernal back for the next pull as well, which is nice. And already my DPS is showing to be a little bit higher, partially due to the improvements that we've made, but also Destruction does benefit from having higher keys. We do have that rather irritating problem. You can see there that I'm highlighting over Impending Catastrophe. If we just go back 10 seconds, and I'll pause it and I'll talk you through the breakdown. So already, bearing in mind that we're not at the first boss, we're only a few minutes in, 5 minutes in to be precise, Rain of Fire has done 3.32 million damage, which is 32.1% of my total damage. Immolation from our Infernal, which is the Immolation Aura, has done 2.6 million damage, which is a total of 20% of our total damage up until this point, and the dot from Impending Catastrophe has done 1.91 million damage. That's 18.5, and not a whole hell of a lot behind our Immolation Aura. Now, obviously, we're playing around with kind of a sub-minute 30 Infernal, like roughly every 90 seconds at the moment, versus the 1 minute cooldown that is Impending Catastrophe. So the damage is kind of split there, but it kind of just shows you just how strong the dot is, because our foresaid Infernal, or our foresaid Blasphemy Infernal, the Immolation from that is actually only 886k, and our Immolation dot is 555k respectively. So the Impending Catastrophe dot component is actually substantial, and as I said, we're only about 5 minutes into the dungeon. And it continues to ramp as we go further, because you've got to remember there are other larger packs. So, a nice pull here. Again, we can go into Impending Catastrophe, Smart Curses are up, which are nice, and we immediately just go into the rotation. Havoc was used as shard generation, and we just go through the rotation. The rotation there was using Incinerate rather than Immolate, because these obliterators with past experience are a problem, so that was a priority choice. But it still played out rather well, because I can leave a lot of the main kind of bulk AoE to Raiden as we go through this key. But as is the way with Destruction, we can kind of slowly keep up and climb. We don't quite beat him for this pack, but we get very, very close, because we immediately chain into the Houndmaster and these two Gargons. I do put a Soul Well down. I don't have it actual bound to an ability, I just have it off to one side, so depending on which spec, it's actually in two different locations, which isn't ideal, because I kind of spend a lot of time in Destruction at the moment, so I have it set up for the most part, and then it's when I play other specs I get confused. So this is a really good kind of 3-pack to just play around with, because it gives us time to get our Infernal back for the next Shard of Halkias pull, because the next pull is going to be quite big. So this was quite good pacing, because this pack is 20% and we've still got 10 seconds left on our Infernal. A little bit less than that when you consider Wilfred's, but still, it's not too bad. So again, kind of same situation here. Pack's about to die. We take the Stoneborn. The tank's already gone off. He's already gone. And the Gargons are actually still up. So our pull cadence is a little bit faster than 21. We're a little bit more comfortable. We're warmed up. And we're going into it. Now again, at the start of this, while the healer's getting prepped, things got a bit dicey. So it was an Unending Resolve and Dark Pact, which, for the most part, as long as I don't do anything stupid, does make me partially immortal. As we get everything rolling and the healer kind of stabilizes. You'll notice that our burst isn't anywhere near as high this time, and the reason for this, aside from the fact that things got a little bit scary. You can see here that I actually go into the Spirit Link. I remember this time, which definitely helps in terms of redistributing the healing. So a quick learn through the dungeon as we went. But the reason this particular pack isn't anywhere near as quote-unquote impressive is because we chained the pack. So we went from still being in combat with the 2 Gargans to then pulling into this Halkias pack. Had we had that moment for Details to be able to kind of refresh itself, we'd have been in a better position where we could have potentially have seen 2, 90k DPS burst moments from myself and Urban. But all in all, it was a good pull, and we did a respectable amount of damage. So far, our overall is 32.3k, which is a really good substantial opening to this dungeon, and one of our best yet. You can see that again, I'm popping Infernal on cooldown, kind of trusting that we're going to have things back when we need them, and making sure that I don't press any invisibility buttons. Or potions, sorry. Because obviously it's a 5-minute cooldown at this point, and Halkias is going to go down within 5 minutes. Raiden, unfortunately, or Urban, got caught there accidentally by a Darkblade, but that's not too bad. Not as bad as me inting within the first, 20 seconds of a dungeon. Now, this pack, again, as I discussed in the 21, can be pulled in onto the boss, but is being used as a way to essentially recuperate cooldowns. So, again, trusting the tank, and this is where it benefits to have used Infernal on the previous pack, because by the time this pack goes down, I will have Infernal ready for boss. Now, from a trinket perspective, and I'll go into it more in depth in my next video, in a situation like this, it might actually be better to have 2 passive trinkets, whether it be Elegy, Changeling, or just a proc trinket, like the PvP proc trinket that procs main stat. Something like that is potentially more beneficial if you're having a really fast pull cadence and Infernal isn't always going to line up. It's why you start seeing other races also being really, really good. If your main cooldowns, or you can't stack main cooldowns, then having passives is a lot better. You can see here that I'm immolating both targets before I take them over, and this is for that shard generation that we discussed. Which then means that we can go into this. Impending Catastrophe goes into Halkias. It doesn't go through the relics like I'd have wanted, but still pretty good. Havoc's immediately used, and we go on getting the cooldown back from as quickly as possible, and just generally helping the healer out. You can see this time I'm more aware of where the tank is facing Halkias, so we don't end up in the same position that the 21 happened, where I got clobbered and we lost both these Loyal Stormborns. They're still doing work, and they're still hitting the boss. I was going to say there's something else, but let's try and keep this PG-13. So, you can see just how much of a difference that made, me not cocking up in terms of getting hit by the tank busting mechanic. We do have a bug here where the beams just don't rotate, and then they snap in. I'm not entirely sure what caused it. It is a known bug if you have something like a taunt the moment it starts, specifically monks, and it's been a known bug since BFA, because it happened in King's Rest as a dungeon. Stitch, our good old monk from Calamity, was known for doing it when he was really, really bored. Just, spin to win. Because the way it worked, at least then, was Taunt would try and force the boss to face the tank, but the mechanic itself is also trying to get it to rotate. So the game code has it essentially stay still, but because the damaging ability rotates, you just can't see the beams. And I don't know if that's still the case, but it's what we found prior. So, not entirely sure if it was just a bad taunt or, really hard aggro swap somehow, but Now, a little bit of a confusion, because the Stoneborn was still active for a while, we were rather confused as to why we couldn't invis, but we worked it out. Now, this is the point where we actually found out that Raiden struggles with the camo, and having rewatched it back, I can tell you how it struggled. Camo doesn't break Bronn. So, his camouflage, or hunter stealth, would get him through if he could avoid detection or being directly in front of the mobs. However, because it doesn't get rid of Bronn, Bronn doesn't go into camouflage. So Bronn is what pulled there. And then the rest of him pulled. Thankfully though, it was a fairly quick recovery with a quick res, and thankfully his pet didn't die this time either. So we go straight into the boss and we don't have the wait that we had last time. Now, again, much like in the 21, you burst as quickly as possible here. Now, we are going to change how we deal with this slightly. So you can see that actually decursors are going out. Both the Chamois and Blaze both decursed. Much to the confusion of Blaze, bless him, because he was kind of confused as to why he didn't get stunned. Because obviously he's used to dispelling the person with the debuff. And again, kind of demonic circle, using that to teleport out to avoid taking unnecessary damage. Now, we're going to treat this boss a little bit differently. You can see that we're actually killing it really quickly. And Infernal's got about 20 seconds when you take into account Wilfred's at this point. And it's coming up to 30% health. And I'm actually just going to hold Infernal. And in the 21 we discussed about how in some cases you'd want to just use Infernal on cooldown regardless to get this boss down, because he can be problematic. But in terms of passing or doing good overall damage, it's actually better to hold the Infernal for the next pack, because it can get very, very sketchy. And this is one of those occasions where, primarily because of how quick Echelon was going down, I held Infernal. And still doing respectable damage as a result, because you've got to remember, these little stone imps, essentially, that are summoned by Echelon, if you aim through them with Impending Catastrophe can do a substantial amount of damage for you, which is always nice. Now, a couple of kicks and ring probably should have been better utilized there, but the boss was nearly dead. Now, in the 21, I got slapped. This time, we're a little bit more aware of the fact. I say a little bit more aware of it, it is still an absolute cluster. So I unending resolve to ensure that I live. Infernal's down, we're going through the Incinerate, just making sure that the Houndmasters are going down, Dismantler's going down, we get the Mastery. A Shadow Fury goes out just to try and control things because the tank was a little bit sketch. And we just follow through with our Rain of Fires at this point because we've got shards for days, as you can see. So, pretty nicely handled. A fair amount of DPS. Both Blaze and Raiden kind of doing their thing, and me just with Infernals cheesing everything. But it was a good use of it all in. Now, we have 43 seconds left before Infernal, and again, this is where we end up in a situation where we end up holding it, primarily because, or at least I think I hold it, because we're really, really close to the boss. And again, discussing relics, you want to go for Vi next, you don't want because you're going to be immediately pulling onto the boss. So Vi is your pseudo Bloodlust, and then you have for the boss. And I was right. You can see that I hold Infernal for this reason. So there's not really too much to report here. The Collect Sins got kicked, which was nice, so we didn't end up with any small ads. And you can kind of see that, again, I still have that Ephemerate stat orb the white glowing things around me. I just haven't got around to changing that trinket, not trinket, that ring yet, and to put something with speed on it. The stats I'm running for this particular dungeon are putting me at 34 crit, 34 mastery, and 35 haste, so I have a relatively good balance. Or rather, 19% crit when Changeling doesn't proc. So 35, 19, 34. I do have a set up that has me closer to 25-ish across the board, but I've yet to do some proper testing to see if that's actually better than having this almost 36% haste. Because an interesting thing to note is I don't have food buff, because obviously I died early in the dungeon and haven't turned around to replace the food buff, because there hasn't been time, because our pull cadence has been high. So Interceptor goes down, I've taken the 2 lower Stoneborns, and we just go straight into the boss, because thankfully the Stoneborns will come through regardless, and we can just follow through. Now, because of how this fight plays out, and the amount of stacking we've done in terms of cooldown usage, the impending catastrophe, and having the 2 lower Stoneborns, you can see that we're doubling everyone else's damage. Which means that by the time our cooldowns end, our Inquisitor has lost a substantial portion of their health. Now, 23 is probably a good example of to show you how imperative it is for you to make sure that the soul that spawns goes to a canister as quickly as possible. However, this is almost like a soft enrage, essentially, for this fight, because these canisters take longer and longer to respawn. So you end up with periods where you have longer and longer points towards the end of the fight where the soul is just wandering around doing damage. Now, thankfully, we're getting this down fairly quickly. We do have a canister left, and it was pulled over really, really quickly. So the canister now despawns, but that does mean that we don't have a canister at all remaining, and we have a fixation in a few seconds. So this is more of a race at this point to see where it is. You can see that it's actually been spawned in the back corner of the room, directly opposite me. So it's been marked, and I'm the one that targeted in the wrong position. So I actually get clapped here, and using the vented door of shadows rather than soul shape to get across was probably about the same amount of time, to be honest. I took unnecessary damage, I think, just stood there getting slapped on. But it's a case of, had I have been more aware of where it was, even though it was marked and reacted faster, I could have door shadowed over immediately rather than waiting for me to get fixated because I was greeding. Now, this room is obviously where we have the most fun. Impending catastrophe there could have been aimed a little bit better. What I should have done is, rather than standing to the left where I was, gone over to the right and had to go through all the souls on the right hand side to Cigar. Sorry, nameplates, I was looking for the right one. We do end up with Vi here, which is a little bit of a pain. Ideally we would have wanted but this is more to enable the healer to focus on helping kill things and not necessarily having to stress about constantly keeping us all alive because of the fixates and damage. Thankfully, though, everything was clumped up well enough that we were able to do a substantial amount of damage just through Rain of Fire, AoEs, and our Immolation Aura, which was great. It does mean that we end up with a few staggered souls just kind of on their own, doing their own thing. Shadow Fury comes out to just kind of like neaten things up. At that point, it was probably unnecessary, but it just got whatever was fixated on me off, at least for a moment, to kind of give me breathing room. Now, again, Sigurd kind of just falls over at this point. Infernal has just come back, but with 60% health, I kind of make the decision to just hold, because we've got more than enough time to comfortably do this. And it's just the case of like, right, no stupid risks, just play this safe and we're good. Which is a nice place to be honest. I was rather proud at this point. It has to be said, because this is the highest key I have ever pushed to date in terms of relative difficulty. I may have pushed something similar back in Legion, but I can't recall if I'd ever broken the 20 barrier. I think I was hitting 17s, 18s at the time. So this was a proud me moment, and I was doing my very, very best not to cast a curse it. So Sigurd goes down without really too much of a problem. Looking back in terms of the fact that like everyone held cooldowns, I probably could have got away with using an Infernal, maybe. I wouldn't have had it immediately on pull here, but then again, does it really matter? Impending Catastrophe goes out. Havoc, mouse over, fantastic thing, great getting the hang of. Straight onto the Dismantler, and we can just go into Chaos Bolting and primarily focusing on Chamberlain. As a result, Dismantler goes down without a problem. And then it's dodging these statues. That was a little bit too close. Should have moved a little bit sooner. But very much trying to turret and maximize what damage I can. Now, at this point I realized, or during this particular boss fight, we realized that I am the only combat res in the group. Because we do have an engineer, but he doesn't actually have anything, or he wasn't carrying any of the engineering reses. So that's something that we need to make sure that we're stocked up on going forward. And the reason we realize it is because you can see there that I took a lot of damage because I was soaking. I did Dark Pact that. And coming up to this next one, I actually die. So spoiler alert. But it's how I die. So the Shaman died there and I combat resed. We have 2 combat reses remaining with 417 for the third. Now, that's worst case scenario. We still have time. And we go into the next kinetic onslaught into Ritual of Woe. So I unending resolve this. We have Spirit Link. Now, I do have a health cookie remaining and a mortal coil, but I genuinely thought the healer had me because I was the only one really taking damage. And he didn't, essentially. Going through the logs, I had splash healing done to me, and that was it. He'd kind of spirit linked and then thought that was just going to save the day. So in hindsight, I should have not necessarily trusted the healer, but been prepared to take action when something felt wrong. So Mortal Coil, Health Stone. Might not have saved me because I did just get rotted down quite quickly, but it could have saved me. So the boss obviously falls without too much of an issue. We're kind of laughing at this point about the fact that, you know, we don't, like, I am the only combat reser, so if I do die or we have a problem, we then can't recover. So Blaze obviously goes down, and then it becomes a Raiden and tank thing with the healer throwing out a couple of lightning bolts to help. And the boss goes down, which results in that 23.3k damage overall that you can see there, which is probably the best I have performed in a dungeon. Now, hopefully we can challenge that, and we're going to keep the 21 halls, this 23, and if we can, we're going to try and get a 24 or 25 halls at some point and actually compare the differences in damage profile. Because as you can see, I'm playing Venthia Warlock in these 2. So maybe when I come back from download, I'll actually do a comparison between a 21 and a 23 about how mobs live differently, and even how just a couple of levels at this difficulty can mean the difference in when you use your Infernal and how likely things are to survive your Infernal. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I will see you again soon, either in the next couple of days live for the video or when it is scheduled to be released. I'll catch you all then. Take care, folks, and have a wonderful weekend.